I want to open the floor for any of you who have a pressing question. I made a few notes, but I'm happy to hear. Can you bring over the mics if you would? I'm happy to hear any questions anybody has. Anybody? Have at it. There are a lot of smart people in this room. Love to hear industry comment, perhaps. Or David?
For both of our physicians on the panel, you both have done amazing, innovative things. What are you most proud of? What innovation are you most proud of?
Sounds like Don.
Well,
Yeah.
For me, obviously, the motorized instruments and arthroscopic surgery was.
Motorized instruments and arthroscopic surgery, which we take for granted, and I know, Christian, you say that. You know, what are all the things, all the technologies that we now take for granted that were revolutionary? But please answer David's question.
I must tell you, I don't really know. What are you most proud of was the question, huh? I think for those innovations who have brought the best benefit to patients compared to what was present before, latissimus dorsi transfer certainly was one, if the indications were correct. Filling the humeral head for locked posterior dislocation was something that I like. I have not created any really reasonable products, but I'm very proud if I accomplished the mission that I could serve my initial purpose and created something that has improved patients. Maurice Mueller was my first teacher, and Maurice Mueller said, the goal is to leave something that wouldn't be there without you. Whatever it is, it's okay, if it is positive.
That's very humble, but there are so many things you can read that he's created, and it's not just products. It's mostly it's concepts. The whole concept of third-generation arthroplasty, the concepts of durability of a prosthesis because of its design, very, very transformational in that particular area. And that's not the only. I mean, he won the award given by the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, the Kappa Delta Award for bench-to-bedside for rotator cuff repair, introducing science that heretofore wasn't really connected to the clinical care for rotator cuff. And I think that is the foundation upon which the rest of us build if we seek to influence that area, although it was fascinating to me when you made the comment, Christian, that nothing seems to have happened in the last, I don't know how many years, in terms of changing the outcome. I find it very hard to apply that to what you've done because you've clearly changed how we think about rotator cuff repair and healing. And there's a whole area of innovation now trying to address this through biologics and other augmentations that may or may not be successful, but that's largely built on the biomechanical and clinical and biological studies that you've done. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Ron and for John?
Just to highlight it, Professor Gerber probably came up with the first convertible stem, to my knowledge, the original short stem. So many innovations came conversion on the stem. I mean, just thought of so many great ideas.
Right. So let me repeat that, and this is a comment from industry. You know, the concept of a convertible stem didn't exist heretofore. Concept of anatomical head, to say the least. Shorter stems, not longer stems. This isn't a hip, it's a shoulder, etc. And you go on and on. These are all might be thought of as incremental, but together they are transformational, in my opinion. So sorry, I don't agree with you. Just move on to IPT. Yeah.
Sorry, over here. Very quick question for Ron. How are you going to test your product in terms of a minimal viable product? Are you going to test it in specific hospitals or in a certain location, academics or private? And secondly, what do you think about the customer acquisition cost for this business?
So the question was, how do you experiment with this? How do you come up with a minimum viable product? And then how do you think about a go-to-market strategy? And so I'll answer it both at the level of the company as well as the level of strategy. Minimum viable product, many of you probably know this term, which is, you put something experimental in the market And then you use that to iterate to figure out what people really want. The challenge with that approach in an ecosystem where you're dealing with partners as opposed to just a single end consumer is that if you're asking a multiplicity of partners to change their business processes just for an experiment that may go wrong, it's very hard to motivate them. So the approach that one should take in ecosystems, and the approach that IPT has taken, is one, what you need to launch with is something that will really deliver that value rather than experiment with the idea of would this be valuable, right? So this gets to your comment, both of you, about the need for conviction in what you're doing, right? So the bet has been made and been played. The second question then becomes, so what does go-to-market look like, right? And so go-to-market is, we're, I think, 5 facilities at this point, gathering the data, gathering the evidence, and it's as much about getting, so hospitals are very, very excited about signing up. The issue, of course, is how do you pick the ones that make sense early on? And I think kind of what we're trying to do right now is circle back and bring now that we have real evidence, real economic data to share, to bring the manufacturers on board. And once they come into play, that's when the system, I think, will really take off. But John, do you want to comment?
Well, I can say the concept was first tested in my small community hospital, 3 ORs, very small, CSP, not downstairs, actually across the hall from where my operating room is, so a very visible space. Tested the concept and then developed it even more, so that was sort of a very initial alpha, and then the system has now been sort of in a beta phase testing at several different institutions, smaller to medium-sized facilities, with plans to go into larger facilities as we go. And as Ron said, there's about 5 facilities right now that's currently up and running, with many that want to come on board. The problem is fundraising to scale up to size to get to that next level.
Christian, you want to make a comment or ask a question?
Why don't I make a stupid comment? From a standpoint from Switzerland, I must say we do not have that experience, in our hospitals. And it reminds me of Walter Cronkite. When I listen to you, I always, have an aphorism of Walter Cronkite. He was talking about the American healthcare system, and he said, the American healthcare system is neither healthy, nor caring, nor a system. And it's really surprising, that I must say, and we are a little bit with the wrong button concept also. I think the industry has made major errors in providing trays. I mean, the fact that you have 7 trays for a total knee replacement is declaration of failure of the engineers. I mean, they're just too stupid. If they have to create 7 trays that you can put in a total knee replacement, it is defined that you will not find one single scrub nurse in a hospital which can scrub on a total knee and a total hip, which has probably also 7 different trays, and at night even for, I don't know, a fracture. So I think alignment should probably also start with opening the buttons and just tell the industry, I mean, we have a problem that we need to solve, and you have a system that can really make that much easier. But I can tell you that even at night, in other countries, and obviously Switzerland is a very small country and poor country and a little bit underdeveloped, but we do not have these problems.
So, first of all, I loved your presentation and I love your comment. A small correction, I think that this CSPD story and trays and loaners work pretty much the same way throughout Europe. Maybe Switzerland's an exception. Industry guys can correct me.
We have industry here. They know
about
their distribution and supply chain, so we can see if they agree or not.
So I think, one, it is a problem everywhere. But I think the really intriguing part of the comment, and this is the difference between great innovations that succeed and great innovations that fail. So I think the comment of industry, just reinvent yourself, obviously the right thing to do. However, really, really hard to get done, right? And so that is, even if you were to come up with a two-tray solution, we have a one-tray solution. Well, you're making my point. So they have a one-tray solution, but it has not taken over the world.
Yeah.
So how do you make that happen, right? It's by aligning the ecosystem to do this. And I actually think that this kind of approach will, if you can come up with a one-tray solution, having this kind of data available for the first time ever will make it that much easier for industry to see which is actually the better solution. It'll help them solve their own internal politics of, look, there's somebody who's arguing for the 17th tray, right? And in an environment with no data, I think this is one of the things that you were saying, an environment with no data, it's power and religion that rule. The more data that can be brought in, the more rationality we can have. And so I think we're pretty well aligned.
Can I ask a question, which is a little bit in discussion? I know in Europe, I don't know whether it's a discussion here, that is the single-use trays for the whole procedure. I mean, the Medacta, for instance, is considering bringing every single instrument, every trial, everything is single-use, throw it away, and the 3 or 4 trays come, and all the 4 trays they are in plastic or whatever and disappear. Is that something that's going to happen here? Is that or not?
You're asking about disposable, so you don't have inventory to manage? Yeah, there are companies that have a green proposition now evolving, but let's ask that question. Does industry want to respond to that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Matt Putnam. I have been an orthopedic surgeon for over 30 years, and the last 6 years I've worked at J&J, so that's the industry response. But we have supply chain issues, we have green initiatives, all those things are true. Our biggest need today is related to MDR, medical device regulation. This solution you've showed us, the IPT thing, is really interesting to me. The reason I'm here is to hear about outcomes. But I didn't actually anticipate that this would be possibly a new way for us to gather those. And it may well be that was something that we were overlooking. But whenever you deliver these trays to a doctor, you're also delivering them to a patient. Correct. And that's where we need to start gathering data. And curiously enough, not just about the prosthesis, there are registries and we use those, they're expensive. We need to gather data on the instruments or we won't even be able to let you use a prosthesis because now MDR is saying you need data on the instruments too. So we need an inexpensive way to do it, and this could be a possibility for us. So I really appreciate your presenting it.
I'm delighted.
That's good. Maybe there's a little ROI here, but we'll see. I have a question. I know maybe others, and we probably have to end this session momentarily and move on further, but John or Ron or whoever wants to answer this, just maybe I missed this, and it may be just me. Who's paying for this is number one. And number two is, do you anticipate any barriers in hospital adoption? It's wonderful where you are, John, but it may be the case that if you look at the organizations in which we work, the large academic medical centers tend to be resistors. And the smaller hospitals like yours tend to be more open to innovation. What do you think, what's your strategy there in terms of scaling this through those that are early adopters and those that are resistors? And then what about, the business model? Who's paying?
So I think it's a great question. I'm actually going to invite Dave Nichols, who's the CEO, here to answer that. But I think the shortest version is everyone is paying something, and that's what makes the solution work. In terms of resistance, I think you might be surprised, but I'll defer to Dave.
Yeah, can everybody hear me? Actually, we're in conversations with most of the large health systems in the country. They've been finding the value for them is very profound because they're having a significant amount of problem with understanding what's coming in, who's it touching, and what's happening to it after it leaves, a lot of the chain of custody. So Actually, while they've been saying 5 hospitals, it's actually pilots for systems up to 300 facilities. So this isn't doing stuff in a community hospital. That was done during COVID when access to hospitals was very difficult. It's very difficult to test something in that COVID environment. Since then, we've moved beyond, and we've actually been intentionally collecting additional data before we go out to scale.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we're going to move on from here.